Somewhere in South Carolina right now, there's a county that just became the fastest growing county in the entire United States. Not the fastest growing county in the state, not the fastest in the Southeast, the fastest in the entire country, ahead of every single county in Texas. South Carolina isn't just growing anymore, it's metastasizing. The state added roughly 80,000 new residents in a single year, and the places absorbing them are small towns that went from tobacco fields and dirt roads to full-blown subdivisions seemingly overnight. The infrastructure can't keep up, the schools definitely can't keep up, and the people who already live there, they're watching their two-lane country roads turn into parking lots. We've got a town that enacted 2 separate construction moratoriums in under a year just to catch its breath. A retirement boomtown growing faster than any county in America, a community whose own census numbers still show it shrinking even as bulldozers clear the fields around it, and a lake town that got hit with an outright building ban because the water supply couldn't handle one more subdivision. If you enjoy watching the South Carolina housing market slowly spiral in real time, you're in the right place. This isn't Charleston or Greenville proper we're talking about, the places that have already been discovered and priced accordingly for years now. This is the ring of small towns around them, the ones that used to be a punchline about how little there was to do, now absorbing more new construction than most of them have roads, schools, or water lines to handle, and often with far less warning than the bigger cities got when their own growth spurts hit. Hit that like button and let's count them down. Number 12, Fountain Inn and Simpsonville, Greenville County. 5 years ago, Fountain Inn City Hall was a sleepy 1970s building where you could find a parking spot without circling the block. Today, it's so overcrowded that staff work out of what they've started calling cloffices, closet-sized rooms pressed into service as offices, and the police department doesn't have anywhere to put its own detectives. City Administrator Sean Bell said it about as plainly as you can. Some of those spaces probably aren't even meant to be offices in the first place. Fountain Inn grew from about 13,800 residents to nearly 15,000, adding roughly 900 people and 6.5% growth in just a few years, while neighboring Simpsonville hit 26,000 residents, up nearly 18% since 2019. A pace neither city was really built to absorb, part of a broader wave that's landed 4 different upstate cities on the state's fastest growing list at once, alongside Greer and Maldine, both adding thousands of new residents of their own in the same stretch of years. The city is now spending $35 million on a new municipal complex just to give its own employees somewhere to sit, and the state transportation department has already approved eliminating a stretch of Helm Street just to make room for the project. Meanwhile, Greenville County Schools is expanding Fountain Inn Elementary, targeting completion by 2027 because the current building can't hold the kids already enrolled. It's a strange kind of growing pain, a town so busy building subdivisions that it forgot to build itself a bigger front desk. Number 11, Little River and North Myrtle Beach, Horry County. Little River grew from under 9,000 residents in 2010 to nearly 12,000 by the 2020 census, part of a Horry County population that's doubled since 2009 and now logs more deaths than births every single year, meaning every bit of that growth is people moving in from somewhere else, not natural increase. Horry County as a whole has topped 413,000 residents, and the coastal strip from Little River down through North Myrtle Beach has absorbed a huge share of that, a stretch that a generation ago was mostly fishing docks, campgrounds, and a scattering of beach cottages, the kind of place people visited in the summer rather than lived in year-round. Every school serving North Myrtle Beach, Ocean Drive Elementary, Riverside Elementary, Waterway Elementary, the middle school and high school is now projected to run over capacity, and Horry County Schools has designated 20 schools across the district a red zone for the school year from 2026 to 2027. Here's the detail that stuck with me. In January of 2026, the district paid roughly $6 million for the Harborview Par 3 golf course in Little River, not to save it, but to eventually bulldoze it for a new school building. Portable classrooms are the stopgap in the meantime, parked in lot after lot across the district while the permanent buildings get planned and funded. Capital Projects Director Joe Birch said the land purchases are simply about getting ready to build or relieve some future capacity concerns, which is about as calm a way as anyone could describe buying a golf course, specifically because there's nowhere left to put a school, a town so short on space that it had to buy a golf course just to build a classroom, and it almost certainly won't be the last one. Number 10, Lexington and Chapin, Lexington County. Lexington's population climbed from just under 18,000 in 2010 to over 25,000 by 2025, a 32% jump for the decade, with almost 9% of that growth arriving since 2020 alone. County Council recently approved a development of 299 homes over the loud objections of residents worried about traffic and overcrowded schools, which is a normal enough fight in a fast-growing county, except Lexington County actually tried something different first. A formal school capacity input tool meant to let the county weigh in on development based on whether local schools had room. The county quietly removed that tool under pressure from developers and property rights advocates, and the fight over whether it can legally deny developments purely because the schools are full ended up in front of the state attorney general for a formal opinion. That's not a hypothetical policy debate. That's a county that ran out of classroom seats and had to ask a lawyer whether it's even allowed to say no. Chapin itself has stayed small on paper, adding only a modest number of residents inside its own official town limits. But that's mostly a technicality, because almost all of the actual growth is happening in the unincorporated county land around it. Subdivisions with a Chapin mailing address and zero say in a Chapin Town Council meeting. Number 9, Carolina Forest, Horry County. In 2000, this area had about 3,400 people spread across what used to be the Buies Tract. 30,000 acres of longleaf pine that International Paper bought back in 1937 to grow timber, not neighborhoods. By 2010, it had over 21,000 residents, a 518% jump in a single decade, a rate of growth almost nowhere else in the state can match, and it's kept climbing since. 3 of its elementary schools are now running at 133 to 160% of capacity, and the district has already spent roughly $7 million just relocating modular classrooms to buy time while 2 new 1,200-student elementary schools get built. Temporary fixes stacked on top of temporary fixes while the permanent solution slowly catches up. By 2020, the population had climbed to over 23,000, another 11% on top of an already staggering base, and it shows no real sign of leveling off. A pine forest that made paper for 80 years and then turned into one of the fastest growing zip codes on the entire Grand Strand in about a decade and a half, with wetlands the timber company once managed for drainage now managed by homeowners associations instead. Number 8, Blythewood, Richland, and Fairfield counties. Councilman Larry Griffin put it about as plainly as anyone could. At one time, nobody wanted to move to Blythewood because it was country. We've gone from dirt roads and old homes to highways and subdivisions. He's not exaggerating. The town went from roughly 2,000 residents in 2010 to nearly 4,800 by 2020, a 135% jump, and it's added another 52% on top of that since pushing past 7,000 residents. Part of the pull is Scout Motors, a $2 billion electric vehicle plant promising around 4,000 jobs right on the Richland-Fairfield County line, the kind of single project that can reshape a town's entire trajectory almost overnight. The town has gone from 2 schools to 15 within a 10-mile radius, and road widening projects have stalled amid disputes over how the county's sales tax money is actually being spent. Senator John Scott remembers it differently than most people would guess, saying that into the 1990s, Blythewood actually resisted growth on purpose, running on well water and septic tanks with barely any municipal water or sewer service at all. The average home here still runs around $258,000, cheap by Charlotte or Charleston standards, which is exactly why everyone keeps showing up. Number 7, Nexton and the Greater Somerville Growth Corridor, Berkeley and Dorchester counties. A longtime resident named Ashley Brooke Taylor put it simply, "I remember growing up, the only thing on 17A was the big old barn. Now that same corridor holds Nexton, with more than 10,000 residents and a developer-projected path to 25,000 within a decade, plus neighboring Cane Bay at over 13,000 and Carnes Crossroads at nearly 4,000 and climbing. Combined, that cluster could hit 50 to 75,000 people by 2040, roughly the size of a small city rising out of what used to be farmland and pine scrub in under a generation. Berkeley County has averaged 8,500 new residents every year since 2020, adding roughly 35,000 people to the county in just 5 years. A school board member has already warned that 3 or 4 elementary schools will be way over capacity within 2 years. And one resident, Corey Baxter, didn't mince words, calling the pace systematic destruction of the ecosystems that keep this county safe from disaster. That's not a NIMBY complaint about traffic. That's a resident connecting the dots between paving wetlands and the next flood. Traffic bottlenecks are already piling up along Interstate 26, Highway 17A, and Nexton Parkway during evening rush hour, the same roads that used to lead to nothing but that big old barn. Number 6, Ridgeville, Dorchester County. Here's the strangest number on this entire list. Officially, according to the Census Bureau, Ridgeville's population actually fell between 2010 and 2020, from just under 2,000 residents down to about 1,670. And yet local brokers can't stop talking about it. Ridgeville has been discovered, one told a reporter. You can't talk to an economic development team without them bringing it up. A Volvo car plant, a Walmart distribution center, an aluminum plant adding roughly 230 jobs, and a 1,000-acre logistics tract from the State Ports Authority have all landed nearby in just the last few years, and local estimates now put the town's real population closer to 2,000, with projections of up to 2,000 new homes that could triple it within a decade. The catch is that a lot of that growth is stuck waiting on water and sewer line extensions that haven't been built yet, and the roads through town are still, in one broker's words, back roads meant for light traffic, never designed for the daily commute of a growing suburb. Dorchester County overall added 3,600 residents in the most recent year alone, a 16.5% climb over the last decade, so the growth is real even where the official town-level count hasn't caught up to reflect it yet, and it's grown in 24 of the last 25 years running. New construction is already underway. An Eastwood Homes community of about 100 houses and a separate 27-home D.R. Horton project, both priced from the mid-300s to over $500,000. A town whose own official numbers say it's shrinking while bulldozers are already clearing the fields around it, a gap between paperwork and reality that probably won't last much longer. If you're still watching and enjoying this journey through South Carolina's infrastructure chaos, you're one of us. Hit subscribe so you don't miss the next one. We cover places like these every single week. Before we get to the top 5, it's worth zooming out for a second. Demographers who study this stuff keep saying the same thing. South Carolina is a crazy fast-growing state, but the growth isn't spread evenly across all 46 counties. It's concentrated in about 10 of them, clustered around the state's biggest metros and the state lines it shares with North Carolina and Georgia, which means the strain we've been describing isn't diluted across the whole map the way a statewide average number might suggest. It's stacked up in a handful of specific places over and over again, which is exactly why the next 6 entries hit even harder. Number 5, Bluffton, Beaufort County. Bluffton's population jumped from just under 28,000 at the 2020 census to nearly 37,000 by 2025, a 33% increase in just 5 years. Pritchardville Elementary is now running at 126% of building capacity, 161% of program capacity, even with mobile classrooms parked in the lot, and 5 entire neighborhoods now get bused to other schools because there's simply nowhere to put them locally. A workaround that adds real drive time to a lot of families' mornings. The district's answer is an 800-student elementary school, its 23rd campus overall and 5th in Bluffton alone, funded through a 2023 bond referendum and opening for the 2025 to 2026 school year. Meanwhile, the State Transportation Department has launched a full corridor study on Highway 170 specifically because growth has pushed traffic past what the road was ever built to carry. This is the same Bluffton that was a sleepy little riverside arts town for most of its history, one where longtime residents still talk about knowing everybody on May River Road before the Hilton Head spillover found it. Number 4, Moncks Corner, Berkeley County. This one grew by over 10% in a single year, adding roughly 1,700 residents in 2024 alone, on top of about 1,500 the year before that and over 1,500 the year before that, making it the third fastest growing municipality in the entire state. Town planners project 4,500 more homes by 2034, which would push the population to around 29,000, a 67% jump from where it stands now, a pace that would remake the town almost entirely inside a single decade, doubling it while most of the people living there today are still paying off their mortgages. The town's own planning commission put it bluntly in its own meeting minutes: population growth has outpaced the town's ability to maintain their level of service. Their answer, starting in May of 2025, was to charge developers real money for the privilege, nearly $4,800 in impact fees per new single-family home, over $2,600 per townhome, and a scaled fee on commercial square footage on top of that. If you want to build here now, the town wants a check first. Moncks Corner sits right along Lake Moultrie in Berkeley County, one of the fastest growing counties in the entire state, and a decade ago it was the kind of place where people drove into Charleston for anything beyond groceries. That's not really true anymore. Number 3, Hardeeville, Jasper County. Hardeeville's population has more than doubled since the 2020 census, and the city added over 2,200 new residents in a single recent year alone, a growth rate above 16%, making it one of the fastest growing cities in South Carolina outright, and one of the fastest growing anywhere in the entire country by percentage. But the real headline belongs to the county around it. Jasper County was just named the single fastest growing county in the entire United States by percentage, ahead of every county in Texas, driven largely by massive 55 and over communities like Latitude Margaritaville Hilton Head and Sun City Hilton Head, which together account for roughly 13,000 homes and keep expanding phase by phase. County Council Chairman Joey Rowell called the pace scary due to the lack of infrastructure in certain areas, and Hardeeville's own city manager Josh Gruber admitted the job now is simply to keep up with that growth with infrastructure, citing multiple active intersection and roadway projects the city is racing to finish. Large stretches of the unincorporated area around town, the U-Haul Overlay District specifically, still don't have complete water and sewer service, the fastest growing county in America, and parts of it still don't have full plumbing to match. What's happening in Hardeeville is a variation on a pattern we've already seen on this list. Age-restricted retirement communities bring the rooftops and the tax base, but the workers who staff the restaurants, clean the pools, and run the golf carts still need somewhere to live, and increasingly, that somewhere is Hardeeville itself. If you made it this far, you clearly care about where South Carolina is headed, and it's about to get even more dramatic. These last two entries aren't just fast-growing towns, they're the two places in the entire state where local government finally said enough out loud and actually did something about it, which by itself should tell you how bad things had gotten before anyone acted. Number 2, Lake Wylie and Clover, York County. Lake Wylie grew from just under 9,000 residents in 2010 to over 13,600 by 2020, a 54% jump in a single decade, while nearby Clover added 66% over 2 decades. But the real story here isn't the growth, it's what growth eventually forced the county to do about it. York County's own planning department confirmed that the rapid pace of development around the lake had strained roads, traffic, and the water supply badly enough that officials imposed an outright construction moratorium, pausing new development entirely to let the infrastructure catch up. York County as a whole has now grown for 25 straight years running, adding over 22% of its population just in the last decade, almost entirely from people moving in from somewhere else rather than from births outpacing deaths. A lake community popular enough to earn its own building ban, Clover, sitting just up the road, tells the same story on a smaller scale, a town that spent most of the 20th century as a quiet cotton mill community and has spent the last 2 decades slowly turning into another Charlotte suburb with a southern accent. Number 1, Fort Mill, York County. 20 years ago, Fort Mill was best known for the textile mills that gave the town its identity for most of the 20th century, the kind of place people from Charlotte drove past without a second thought. Fort Mill's population went from just under 11,000 people in 2010 to over 24,500 by 2020, a 127% jump in a single decade, and it kept climbing from there, adding another 48% since the 2020 census to reach roughly 36,000 residents today. The town itself now says its population has more than tripled in the last decade. So in the span of about a year, Fort Mill did something almost no growing town in America ever actually does. It hit pause twice. The first development moratorium ran through the end of 2025. A second one, enacted in April of 2026, runs through September of that same year, freezing new residential and industrial rezoning and annexation across the board. Starting in July of 2025, the town began charging some of the highest impact fees in the entire Carolinas, nearly $30,000 per new single-family home, over $20,000 per multi-family unit. York County projects another 64,580 new residents by 2035, which would push the county past 400,000 people within 15 years, and Fort Mill's own school district has already collected over $73 million in impact fees since 2018, just trying to keep classrooms from overflowing. Money that's gone straight into new elementary, middle, and high school construction rather than sitting in a fund somewhere. Even with all of that money flowing in, the district has struggled to open new buildings fast enough to match the pace of the subdivisions arriving around them. One resident summed up the mood better than any statistic could. You gotta have more infrastructure, you gotta have more schools. Fort Mill agreed, and then it did something about it twice in 1 year. This is the town that used to be defined by its old textile mills before those mills closed for good, and it reinvented itself so successfully as a Charlotte bedroom community that corporate headquarters for companies like LPL Financial and Movement Mortgage followed the rooftops right across the state line. It's the single clearest example on this entire list of a town that grew so fast it had no choice but to slam on the brakes, and everyone watching York County right now is waiting to see whether that pause actually holds once the moratoriums expire. And that is 12 South Carolina towns growing so fast that the roads can't keep up, the schools can't keep up, the water and sewer lines can't keep up, and in at least one case, the town's own census numbers can't even keep up with what's actually happening on the ground. South Carolina added roughly 80,000 new residents in a single year, and while a couple of these towns have responded by hitting pause and charging developers real money for the privilege of building here, the state as a whole shows no sign of slowing down. 94 of South Carolina's 271 municipalities are actually flat or shrinking, which tells you this isn't happening everywhere evenly. This isn't a uniform statewide boom so much as a handful of very specific zip codes absorbing an enormous share of the pressure, while huge stretches of rural South Carolina barely change at all year over year, which is exactly why the 12 towns on this list feel so extreme compared to the state's overall growth headline. It's concentrated in a fairly small handful of counties around Charlotte, Charleston, Columbia, Greenville, and the Grand Strand, and those counties are absorbing enough new residents to make up for the rest of the state standing still. Some of these places are catching their breath. Others are still approving subdivisions faster than the roads around them can be repaved. But the fundamental story stays the same everywhere on this list. People keep coming, developers keep building, and the gap between the number of rooftops going up and the infrastructure those rooftops actually need keeps getting wider with every new phase of construction. Even the towns that hit pause aren't really stopping growth. They're just trying to slow it down long enough for the roads, the schools, and the water lines to catch their breath before the next wave of subdivisions gets approved. Whether that gap closes or keeps widening probably depends on how many more towns are willing to do what Fort Mill and York County already did, stop, even temporarily, and make the builders pay their share of the bill. If you made it this far, you clearly care about where South Carolina is headed and which of these 12 towns are going to look completely different 10 years from now. Subscribe, because we cover stories like these every single week. And drop a comment telling me if you've driven through one of these towns yourself and watched it change right in front of you.